This is TWiT.
What problem are people solving when they're reaching for Crail?
Let me just first say in a nutshell what Crail is. So Crail is, as you said before, is a distributed data store that is built explicitly for high-performance storage and network hardware like RDMA networks or NVMe flash. I can talk a little bit more about the hardware later, but for the moment, just think about you have a cluster and it basically runs network and storage hardware that you would normally see in a supercomputer. And Crail is a storage platform that targets mainly temporary data, storing of temporary data in analytics jobs. So like if you have a Spark job running, what you would typically do is you would read in some data from a persistent storage system like HDFS or an object store. And then during the process of computing, lots of temporary data is generated. For an example is shuffle data that is generated. There are plenty of other types of temporary data that is generated during a job, and at the end you would write out the result of that job. And Crail is basically the storage platform you can use to store all that intermediate data effectively. But when we looked at the situation, we found that the current way intermediate data is stored could be improved. So on the one hand side, different frameworks like Spark or Hadoop, they all have different ways to store that type of data. Different modules, like a shuffle module, will have a different way to store that data than, let's say, some broadcast module in Spark. So we found it would be good to have a sort of a unified storage platform that can consume that type of data, and that can give you the best performance on really fast hardware. That type of hardware I mentioned before, very fast networks, flash storage, plenty of DRAM, and so on.
If I may just jump in.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so if I may just jump in, right? So kind of you can think of because you must seen the poster, right, where someone says the data center is my computer, right? So you can see the equivalent analogy that you're trying to read in and write out the data on a persistent storage, which is something like HDFS. And when the data is brought in, then it's processed in the DRAM, right? So the Crail store would be the equivalent analogy of a DRAM in a distributed data center. So essentially, this is where you compute your results, you share it, you store it, you read and write, and once you're done with the processing, you can finally write the final output out on your persistent storage.
And so this is distributed too. So it's not just one machine talking to it. It's a lot. A bank of computers all working on the same temporary data. Then, right?
Exactly. It's meant to run on a distributed system. It's meant for the distributed data processing frameworks, and it's meant to run in a big data centers.